Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, Rimuru successfully forced Feldway to retreat. Although Benimaru's boastful remarks almost ruined everything, Feldway's overly cautious nature led him to stick with the decision to withdraw. Thus, the crisis in Golden City El Dorado had been successfully resolved. In this episode, we'll look into the post-battle meeting between Rimuru and Guy, particularly featuring the humorous duo Rain and Diablo. As the mastermind behind Rimuru's portrait circulating on the black market comes to light, Diablo and Rain's secret dealings are also exposed. Let's get started. Rimuru and his group found an undamaged meeting room in the war-torn castle to conduct their post-battle review and summary. The participants included Rimuru, Diablo, Benimaru, Suwei, Guy, Misery, Rain, and their demon subordinates, several of Leon's knights, Sylvia, who had come to help, and the crucial witness, Kigali. The purpose of the meeting was for each one to report in turn, sharing intelligence on the enemy, and then to formulate new strategies for the future. As for what Kamara and Ranga were doing, the book doesn't specify. Maybe Kamara was out walking Ranga. Tia, having been severely injured while protecting Kigali, was in the medical room receiving treatment. And in this tense atmosphere, one person had latched onto Rimuru. Yes, it was Guy. Rimuru knew exactly why Guy was pestering him. It was clearly because Rimuru had ignored Guy, who was struggling against Velzard on the battlefield. However, our Rimuru-sama's specialty was playing dumb and bluffing his way out. Guy was the first to question Rimuru, accusing him of daring to ignore him earlier. Rimuru feigned ignorance, claiming he didn't understand what Guy was talking about, and asking when he had ever ignored Guy. Guy pointed out that they had clearly made eye contact on the battlefield, yet Rimuru had gone off to another area instead of helping him. Rimuru decided to change the subject, stating that the most important thing was that everyone came out of the battle unharmed. Guy retorted that Leon had been taken by Feldway, asking how that could be considered unharmed. Guy's statement was true, but the matter of Leon being taken by Feldway was actually part of Rimuru's plan, or more precisely, it was part of Seal's plan. According to Seal, as long as Leon was devoured by God of Void, Seal could destroy the control circuit of the Lord of Justice. Rimuru hadn't done this, not because he found it physically unacceptable, but for another purpose, to make Michael and Feldway lower their guard. By making them believe that Rimuru's side had no means to counteract the control, they could awaken Leon and turn the tide in their favor when Michael and his forces attacked again. This was a battle plan that Guy had previously agreed to, and so far, it had achieved its first objective, Leon being taken away. However, Leon's subordinates were still worried about his safety, fearing that Michael might execute him. Rimuru reassured them that Leon would return safely, thinking to himself that Michael probably wouldn't do something as senseless as executing Leon. Despite the discussion about Leon, Guy's attention wasn't diverted. Guy once again questioned Rimuru, asking why, after making eye contact, Rimuru didn't come to help him. Rimuru was quite exasperated by Guy's persistent nagging. This time, Guy directly called out Rimuru, stating that pretending to be clueless wouldn't work. Guy recounted how he was struggling against Velzard, yet Rimuru didn't even pretend to want to help and instead ran off. Rimuru retorted that he didn't run away but had faith in Guy. Thanks to Diablo's influence and the verbal sparring with Feldway, Rimuru's debating skills had significantly improved. Guy continued, saying that while Rimuru was good with words, if he had come to help quickly, Guy wouldn't have had to exert so much effort. Rimuru countered by pointing out that Guy didn't even attempt to contact him, whereas Rimuru had been on high alert the whole time, ready to respond as quickly as possible. Guy responded by saying that the teleportation magic circles were set up precisely for rapid mutual support. However, Rimuru pointed out that those teleportation magic circles couldn't be activated at all. Rimuru suddenly remembered that the Demon Lords also had the Demon Lord rings, which were supposed to allow communication under any circumstances, even within the Infinity Prison. Yet neither Guy nor Leon had used these rings to make contact. If Guy had truly been in trouble, A single word through the ring would have brought Rimuru to his aid. The fact that Guy hadn't used the ring indicated that his battle was well under control. Rimuru thought to himself that if Dino hadn't sent a timely message, his response might have been even later. He felt Guy should be grateful that he arrived as quickly as he did. Upon hearing about the Demon Lord rings, Guy remembered that these rings were made by Velzard, which meant Velzard could easily interfere with communication between the Demon Lords. Guy, unusually, apologized and suggested that he consider them even now. Both nodded, realizing that this wasn't the time or place for arguing, as continuing to quarrel would only cause more trouble. Rimuru decided to act mature and bring this topic to a close. Then there was something else that caught Rimuru's attention. His gaze shifted to Rain and Misery, who were kneeling on the marble floor, and he asked Guy why they were in this position. From the moment they entered the room, Rain and Misery had been kneeling on the floor. Mentioning these two, Guy's expression turned stern. Rimuru's intuition told him that getting involved would be troublesome. However, Guy ignored Rimuru's desire to avoid the matter and stated that while everyone else was fighting for their lives, these two foolish maids were happily drinking and chatting. Guy expressed his genuine anger towards them and was contemplating how to deal with them. Because the situation was so absurd, Rimuru turned to Rain and Misery and asked if what Guy said was true. Upon Rimuru's inquiry, Misery stared silently into the distance, while Rain tearfully insisted that it was all a tragic misunderstanding. Seeing Rain's fake tears, Rimuru realized that this was definitely not a misunderstanding. Guy declared that Rain's excuses were just polluting everyone's ears. Rimuru agreed, emphasizing that exchanging intelligence was more important. Following Guy's lead, everyone remained silent on the matter, except for Diablo, who shook his head in disbelief but did not speak up. The meeting then proceeded with everyone starting their reports. Misery's lieutenant, Khan, stood up, apologizing and bowing deeply to Guy. He stated that although it was forbidden, he was risking his life to plead with the great Guy-sama to forgive his master, Misery. As mentioned before, in the demon community ruled by Guy, except for Misery and Rain, no other subordinates were allowed to speak directly to Guy, who was considered a godlike figure. Rimuru also thought it would be better for Guy to forgive the two, as having them kneel in front of everyone was quite a humiliating punishment. However, upon hearing Khan's plea, the most agitated person wasn't Guy, but Misery herself. Misery loudly berated Khan, calling him a foolish creature for daring to speak to Guy-sama without her permission. Despite still kneeling, Misery's reprimand was overwhelmingly intense. Witnessing Khan's courage to speak on behalf of his master, Guy acknowledged Khan's growth and sincerity in saving his master. Guy decided to forgive Misery on account of Khan's genuine plea. True to his word, Guy pardoned Misery. The problem arose afterward. Seeing Guy-sama forgive Misery, Rain's subordinate, Mizora, also stood up, intending to plead for her master Rain's release. However, she was mercilessly rejected. Guy's expression turned very displeased, and Rimuru, skilled at reading others, wisely remained silent. Realizing her mistake, Mizora quickly stepped back. Unlike her master Rain, Mizora was someone who understood when to advance and when to retreat. The proof of this was when Rain began to throw a tantrum after seeing Mizora step back. She angrily questioned Mizora on why she gave up so easily, insisting that Mizora was more capable than Khan, and just needed to try a bit harder to save her. Rain argued that since Misery had already been forgiven, there was no reason for her to still be kneeling. This outburst was quite unreasonable, essentially belittling Misery's entire faction. But this was typical of Rain's character, like the youngest sibling who, spoiled by the family, acted recklessly. Indeed, Rain was the youngest of the 7 primordial demons. Guy was at a loss for words but still insisted that Rain reflect on her actions and understand where she went wrong. When questioned by Guy, Rain tilted her head nervously and said she didn't know. Though she looked cute, her true nature was already exposed, making her appear insincere. Guy felt exhausted from the bottom of his heart. He pointed out that the empty bottles scattered around the ice hut were of rare, high-quality liquor, questioning how Rain had obtained them. It was either through theft or extortion. Such behavior, stealing or intimidating subordinates, was absolutely intolerable among demons. However, at this moment, Mizora bravely spoke up, insisting that her master, Rain, was not so despicable and had moral boundaries. She added that Rain was not lacking in money. Hearing Mizora's defense, Guy seriously asked her how Rain had acquired those rare bottles if that were the case. At this moment, Diablo suddenly interjected, suggesting that they let the matter go. Compared to the important issues that needed to be discussed next, punishing Rain seemed insignificant. Seeing Diablo plead on her behalf, Rain's eyes welled with tears of joy as she expressed that Diablo was the most reliable. However, Diablo's partiality toward Rain was clearly out of character. This raised suspicions not only from Guy but also from Rimuru. Rimuru, sensing something was off, questioned Diablo, suspecting he was hiding something. Diablo let out his signature laugh, claiming that he was merely sympathizing with Rain and thus decided to speak up for her. Rimuru, well aware of Diablo's nature, silently doubted his explanation and continued to stare intently at him. Sure enough, under Rimuru's unwavering gaze, Diablo's eyes began to shift. Unable to withstand Rimuru's scrutiny, Diablo eventually admitted that the high-quality liquor had actually been a gift from him to Rain. Guy also scrutinized Diablo, stating that his behavior was highly suspicious. He pointed out that Rain and Diablo had always been at odds and constantly quarreling, so it was strange for Diablo to suddenly give Rain gifts. With Sue present, Diablo realized he could no longer keep the secret, and decided to come clean. While Diablo and Guy bickered, Rimuru signaled to Sue, who quickly understood and retrieved the evidence. From the ice hut, Sue retrieved various empty bottles. This made it clear to Rimuru why Diablo had so suddenly confessed. The reason was simple: the bottles included sweet wine, black sake, and other experimental types of liquor, which the Monster Federation was still developing. These were not only produced in limited quantities but were also not yet in circulation. Even if Diablo hadn't confessed, it would have been easy to trace the bottles back to him. Seeing the assortment of bottles laid out, Rimuru was speechless. He hadn't expected Rain and Misery to have consumed so much alcohol. Rimuru now understood why Guy was so angry. While everyone else was fighting hard, Rain and Misery were indulging in drinks. Rimuru felt that Guy's decision to just have Rain kneel was quite lenient, though Rain was still trying to make excuses. Rain hastily explained that the situation wasn't as it seemed. She insisted that the rare liquors were necessary for a high-level psychological battle and were not meant for personal enjoyment. The mention of psychological warfare piqued Rimuru's curiosity, especially since he had just used a similar tactic to drive off Felway. Rain continued, saying she went to great lengths to acquire these precious drinks to make Pico and Gracia talk. Shamelessly, she claimed that from this perspective, she should even be praised. Rimuru couldn't help but marvel at Rain's psychological resilience. Even in such a tight spot, she stuck to her argument. As a fellow primordial demon, Diablo was also someone who believed that not conceding defeat meant never losing. The fact that these two ended up together might be because they were fundamentally the same type of person. Rimuru decided to leave Rain's punishment to Guy and instead focus on his own subordinate, Diablo. Rimuru stated that the rare liquors couldn't have been obtained easily and that Diablo wouldn't have given them to Rain without expecting something in return. Therefore, Rimuru demanded Diablo to truthfully explain what deal he had made with Rain. Under the watchful eyes of Rimuru and Sue, Diablo began to confess. He admitted that in exchange for obtaining Rimuru-sama's portraits from Rain, he had given her those items. In other words, Rain was the one responsible for the circulation of Rimuru's portraits on the black market. As for Diablo, it was merely a barter transaction. Rimuru, not wanting to let the matter of his portraits slide, immediately issued an order to Sue. Sue had already instructed Sauka to conduct a thorough search of Diablo's room. Diablo protested loudly, claiming this was excessive. Sue coldly responded that infringing upon Rimuru-sama's portrait rights was a serious crime. Hearing this, Diablo was deeply shocked. Returning to Rain's situation, as Rimuru dealt with Diablo, Rain also explained to her master, Guy. Surprisingly, she had indeed obtained valuable information during her chats with Pico and Gracia, such as the enemy's base location and their approximate gathered forces. The most critical piece of information came at the end of the chat session when Pico mentioned that Feldway had ordered an immediate retreat. Pico suggested ending their conversation, misleadingly referring to it as an interrogation session instead of casual chatting. Rimuru and Guy immediately sensed something amiss and exchanged glances. By that time, Michael had already tightened his control over those with angelic ultimate skills. Even Leon was forcibly controlled, and Kigali had lost her self-awareness. According to Diablo, Zalerio was also suddenly controlled midway through the battle. Yet, Pico and Gracia seemed unaffected. This led to one conclusion: considering they were in Rain's ice hut at the time, within Rain's magical barrier, Michael's control hadn't further strengthened due to the isolation. In other words, ultimate dominion of Lord of Justice required a confirmed target to exert its influence. If the Dominator left the Dominion's range, it likely couldn't verify whether control was maintained. This was consistent with Michael's inability to ascertain the skill conditions within Ramrus's labyrinth. Therefore, if they could secretly liberate Leon on a battlefield without Michael, they might gain the upper hand before the enemy could re-establish control. Rimuru spoke first, stating that Rain had contributed significantly. Hearing this, Guy reluctantly nodded, begrudgingly admitting that while Rain often seemed useless at critical moments, she somehow always produced unexpected results. There are people in this world who, despite appearing to be playing around, still manage to achieve outcomes. Perhaps that's what makes a genius. Meanwhile, the genius herself, knowing she was saved, Rain had tears in her eyes. It was almost as if Rimuru could hear Rain's thoughts, as expected of Rimuru-sama. Rain couldn't help but say Diablo's classic line, as expected of Rimuru-sama, out loud. She expressed that Rimuru-sama truly understood her and further pledged that if Rimuru-sama ever needed her services in the future, he should not hesitate to call on her. Following the principle of clear rewards and punishments, Guy forgave Rain, ending this farce. The group then resumed sharing intelligence and battle reports. Among the forces present, Vega and Mai Furuki naturally drew everyone's attention. Vega's rapidly growing strength and his skill to absorb opponents' abilities by devouring their bodies troubled Rimuru, as he had a similar skill himself and understood how Vega could become so powerful so quickly. Mai Furuki's instant teleportation also caused concern, as teleportation usually required casting magic, but Mai Furuki's teleportation was a skill requiring no preparation time, something unprecedented. Fortunately, the battle provided this crucial information, prompting Rimuru's side to seriously consider how to deal with enemies who could appear and disappear instantaneously in the future. Alright, that's all for this video. Primordial Demons are a fan-favorite group in the TenSura novel, with their personalities and skills prominently featured. We plan to make individual videos focusing on each primordial demon, summarizing their experiences, personality growth, skill evolution, and mastery process in the future. In our next episode, Rimuru's team will analyze and develop strategies against the three main enemy forces in this battle: Feldway, Zalerio, and Jahil. They will also confirm that Feldway possesses the ultimate skill, Lord of Justice. The next episode promises to be just as interesting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.